So I was just going to record a session of me starting a basically new Cdk project and what I generally do. In this session, I think I want to try and recreate this blog post. So this is a lake formation example. I don't think I'll actually complete the whole thing in this recording, but we'll see how far I get. So in this one, it's looking at govern tables, and they're using CloudTrail, EventBridge, Kinesis Streams, Glue streaming job, and then that dumps into S3. That's managed by lake formation. That's a govern table, and then it gets read by Athena. So as far as I understand, there's a whole bunch of, I guess, custom code in this middle bit, the Kinesis data streams and the Glue streaming job. But what I wanted to do is they've got a launch stack, a CloudFormation stack behind this, and I wanted to grab that stack, grab a copy of that stack, and then basically recreate that whole thing in Cdk. So I can show you how I go through finding each of the resources in CloudFormation and what I end up doing to recreate it. And let's see if I can just grab the template. Okay, great. Can grab it. So this looks like the template. It's got a whole bunch of parameters, a whole bunch of metadata. It's got some resources, so it's got an S3 bucket. It's got a custom resource. I haven't done that in CloudFormation, as in Cdk just yet. Done it in CloudFormation, but not Cdk. Got a Lambda function. The Lambda function has a whole bunch of inline Python code already. Then got an IAM role, another role, policy. What else? How long is this? 600 lines. It's got a glue job down here. And it looks like it's referring to some code somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to have to go through this and see what I can put together. I'm not sure where this code is stored. It says AWS account, so I don't know if that's already set somewhere. Anyway, so that's what I want to recreate. So I'll just go through the process of getting my command line. So I normally work in a downloads directory on my own workstation. So let's create a new directory. I'm going to call it Data Lake Demo 2. All right, then I'm just going to type code full stop, and that's going to open up VS Code. Just going to get a terminal ready. And what do I need? I need to initialize the directory. So it's Cdk init language Python. I'm not specifying any application template, so it should be an empty Cdk solution. Okay, so that has populated my directory with a whole bunch of things. And it's also creating the Python virtual environment for me. So there's my Python virtual environment. And to switch to it, so now I've switched to my virtual environment, as in the Python virtual environment. So if I type in pip list, that will show all the different libraries that I've installed at the moment, which is basically nothing, which is just pip and setup tools. Then they've changed it recently. They've got requirements and requirements dev. don't exactly know how this works, but the requirements is all the Python libraries that need to be installed for this solution to work. So if you run pip install -r requirements and then point to that txt file, it will go away, install the core and the assertions library. Okay. So now I've got the libraries installed into my environment. So if I expand the library, you can see I've got assertions, I've got core, and a bunch of other things. So if you type in pip list again, you can see that it's got those two libraries that I wanted, plus any dependencies of those libraries. Okay. Next is Cdk Json. So Cdk.json has some parameters for this solution, and this just tells it how to actually run this application. So when you run Cdk ls, for example, that's running the Cdk command line, and it will actually always run through this kind of process, this file first, and the entry point is python app.py, so which is this file, and then this includes the application and then any stacks included in this application, and then we'll attempt to synthesize, as in translate from Python into a CloudFormation template. So let me just run this. So this will, you can ignore this box. So it's listed, so I ran Cdk ls, which is list, so Cdk, and then it'll list out each of the application stacks in this solution, which I highlighted here. There's one stack at the moment. Now, just to go back, let's say I happen to rename this to index, then this shouldn't work anymore. And then if I updated this pointer, then it should correct itself. Okay. But for the purposes of not confusing too many things, I'm just going to put it back to what it was. Okay. So we should have that working back again. Okay, so we've got this app.py file, and we've got this stack, which is importing this here on this line. It's pulling this stack from Cdk DL demo 2, and it's pulling that file. So it's referring to this directory, Cdk DL demo 2, and then this specific Python file here. Then you can see the class being established here. And so that's what it's referring to. It's trying to deploy this. At the moment, it doesn't have anything. Let's just, for simplicity, let's just add this back again. So this is what they had in the sample. Now you can see that it's complaining that it doesn't know what this library is. That's because back here, I only installed the core and the assertions. So I need the AWS SQS, I believe that's what it is. So if I run that command again, it should install the SQS library for me. So there it is. Okay, now for this, I find that my VS Code environment doesn't always update very nicely, so I just end up reopening it sometimes. Sometimes that helps. that didn't help. So that one's getting picked up. I'm not sure why this one's not getting picked up right now. Not too sure why it doesn't want to import. Ah, comma. Okay, better. Okay, so what I've done is I just missed a comma. So I installed the library for SQS. Now that's running. So I just run Cdk ls to make sure that Cdk is able to parse my solutions. So it basically double checks my stack and it will actually synthesize. So it changes the stack from Python. So here I've got SQSQ. Then if I look at this one, this is the corresponding Cdk DL demo 2 stack template. So this is the CloudFormation template. And you can see here, it's got the equivalent SQSQ already generated for me. So when you deploy this, it will deploy this queue. Let's just do that now. So the way that I normally deploy things is Cdk Deploy. So you need to have your environment already hooked up with your account. And let me just open up CloudFormation. So at the bottom here, you see all the events. That's actually the CloudFormation events. It's trying to deploy your solution. Okay, hopefully that runs. Okay, so we've got a very simple stack right now. And then let's go back. We had that file that we downloaded, the YAML file. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ignore all of these parameters for the first bit. CloudFormation interface. This is actually just grouping the parameters above. So you see all these parameters. So for example, lake bucket name, that's put here, and then database name, table name. Okay, so all this thing here, the CloudFormation interface, is just controlling the interface on the CloudFormation console. So when you're actually trying to spin up this CloudFormation template, you see you've got 10 or so different input parameters. It's only just grouping those parameters into like parameters. So just on the console, when you boot it up, you'd have these 4 probably in a bounding box, and then these 3 in another subsequent bounding box. Okay, that still hasn't booted just yet. Okay, so let's take this one out for the moment. Then we're going to need a S3 bucket. So I'm going to want a new variable to store my object, and I'm going to need AWS S3. You don't need to use an alias if you don't want, but you can to make it a little bit shorter. And I'll need to also add the S3 library. Just that. Okay, so that should. Okay, so the library's there. Now I should be able to use this library, and I want a bucket. I like being very explicit with the input parameters. So scope, self. So it's saying self, the scope of this resource is within this class. ID, just for this example, I'm going to try and align all of these logical reference names as the ID. Then gonna have properties. Now, when you type it out, you can see that it will try to auto-complete for you. I'm going to ignore this one. I want it to just generate a name automatically for me. This one, access control. And I think if you normally just hover over the object, it will tell you the class and all the parameters, input parameters available, and tell you the data types that it's expecting. So what I'm looking at is access control, which is access controls on the top line. It's expecting bucket access control. Okay, so bucket access control. So that's the S3 element. Okay, that's what it was. Okay, so it's a static variable under bucket access control set to private. Then I want, okay, that's my browser, so I can check CloudFormation. Let's just open that. What's the next thing? The public access block configuration also needs to be set up. Okay, I'll come back to that. Then I want block public access. So it looks like it's second line at the end, so block public access. So everything is set to true. So I'm just going to block everything with block all. Okay, so that's it for this S3 bucket. Now let's just have a look at the CloudFormation stack. Obviously it didn't work. So I'll open CloudFormation, and we previously just deployed the Cdk solution and it had a SQS queue in it. Okay, so here we have the Cdk DL demo stack here. Now, if you go back to app.py, you can see this label. And then if I go back to my CloudFormation, that corresponds to the name of the stack itself. Okay. Then we have a look at the events here. And they should correspond to the CloudFormation events here. So that's all of these things. And then we go to resources. There's metadata for the Cdk solution, and we've got our SQS queue here. Okay. So now that we've made some updates, I can just run Cdk ls just to make sure everything is parsing correctly. Cdk Deploy. Now, since there's only one solution in this, you can just run Cdk Deploy and it'll deploy that one solution. I think if it has multiple solutions, it might deploy everything. But yeah, since it's just one, then that should be fine. So it's creating my new S3 bucket that I defined over here. I didn't actually set a name, but I gave it private access and I blocked all public access. So when I have a look at my CloudFormation stack, it should be in an updating state. So update in progress. What else? So delete in progress. So it's deleting the SQS queue. It's also created my S3 bucket. Now you can see I've got my bucket here. My queue, I think it's still in the process of being deleted. Don't know why this hasn't updated just yet. But while we wait for that, we can have a look at the S3 bucket. Okay, so we have our bucket. Remember, I didn't actually set a bucket name. I just let it choose whatever it wants. If you go to permissions, you should see it's got block all public access, which is this one. And then access control. Not sure where that one is. Ah, here. Access control. I think. Unless that means it might mean this. I think it's this maybe. Okay, anyway, that's beside the point. So now we've got our solution, it's deployed, it's completed. We check over here, check out CloudFormation stack. We've only got our S3 bucket, SQS queue's been deleted. This one, I don't know how to set up just yet. I'll come back to that one. So again, I'm setting up a variable to store my object. So each, I guess, resource in your CloudFormation stack, treat that as a different object. So I'm going to need your Lambda, I think. Now Lambda itself, that word is a reserved word in Python for functions which don't have a name. So you can't use that, so I've just used underscore. Let's just install the libraries again. I think that's right. Let me just reopen the file. Okay, now it's all good. So I want Lambda and I want I believe it's a function. Yep. So scope, self, ID. What else do I need for this one? Description. Function name. Again, I'm going to leave the function name, but I'll put something here. I'll let it determine its own function name. Then handler, so index. So index, it's because we're going to use inline code, I think. Kind of don't really like this, but how about I move this code outside? Okay. So I've just called it custom resource. Let's just try and correct the indents. So it's got the region hard-coded into this already. Alright, I'm not going to look into this code at the moment. Okay, so this raises the question, I've got Python code here, and I want that to be used in this solution. So how do I import that code? It's to do with file assets. So, okay, I think it's this one. Okay, I'm going to have to open up another example that I did for this one. so this is how I did it. Lambda code from asset path join this directory. Alright, let me put that over here. Lambda code asset, what is path? I need this library. This directory path join. Okay, so if I've got this directory, okay. I think this should work then. Okay. So here I'm referencing this directory location. Once I got this directory location, I don't really need the join, but I don't know how to refactor this. Telling that this is an object, Lambda object code, or a code artifact, which is installed in this location, which is this file. And it seems like it's passing this directory path. And then this is where to find it. So that's the file, and then that's the function within this code, which is handler here. Let's just see if this still is okay with all of that. Code. I think I had that in my other example. Okay, so that's the next one. So I've got the handler, then I need to make a reference to the code. This one. Layers. Don't need that. Okay, so role. I'll need to add a role also. Timeout. 300. Runtime. I think this is lambda runtime. And then it's where's Python? Let's stick Python 3.8. What else do I need? So it's passing in so this thing is passing in the region as some sort of parameter into this code, and that's how it's getting that value. This bit I'm not sure how to do it. What does this say? Code. It's a code object. And this is a code object. Okay, I'm not going to use too much time on this one. I'll have to come back to this. This is not going to run then. Let's just continue for now. So we'll need IAM. I will need that library also. Okay, so that one install. It might have already been installed. Okay, so what they call it? So I want IAM, want a role. Role name, which I'm going to ignore again. Assumed role policy document. So that means who can actually assume this role? Assumed by, what did it say? I principal. This one, I don't know what the documentation is. Let's go Cdk Lambda. I want the Python version. And then here, actually, I needed IAM. Because I'm creating a role. Okay, service principal, that's what it was. Okay, service principal, and then the service. And I'm just saying that only Lambda functions can assume this role. And this has a path of nothing. Just at the root, then policies. Make sure you add a comma at the end. So inline policies, so that's what these are. These are inline policy documents. They're not separate manage policies outside of this role. And policies, it's always expecting a, I guess, a list of different policy documents. So inline policies, mapping string policy document. Okay, so here is, I need a policy document. And then what's this one have? This one remember if it needs. Can't remember why it needs this, but anyway, statements. Okay, so this is a single policy document. Then we want to add this policy statement, which is this bit. So policy statement. And in here you can see that we've got actions, we've got conditions. We should have resources in here somewhere. And resources, yep. Okay, so what we want is these three actions. So actions, another list. And we want these three. Okay, so we want these three actions, then we need the resources, and it's only got one, but this still always expects a list. So it's a string. Then it's got policy name, stack name. Okay, where's state? So that's statements. And I'm naming the document. Is there a name? Let's not worry about naming this thing. Okay, then I want another policy statement that has actions. And I want to allow get object. So against this bucket, then it's also saying I want to be able to write to these buckets, and then I want to be able to list each of the buckets above. Okay. So let's just do that. Let's just copy and paste this. So that's for the writing. So that's going to be put on here. Then I want these two. It wants substitute. I don't know the functions off the top of my head. Sub. Okay, I think that should be fine. Body and mapping variables. Okay, I got no mapping variables. I got body. I don't know if this is going to work, but we can try. Okay, so I'm using the CloudFormation function, which is substitute, and substitute will simply find and replace these parameters, and they get replaced as the pseudo environment variables. It's a CloudFormation thing, so it's not it doesn't actually get translated in CDK, but it gets deployed as is, and then CloudFormation will handle the find and replace bit. Okay, so we've got these two. Let's just add these two to the last bit. So we've got all three now, and we want to create the bucket, and we want to list the buckets. That's got a policy name too. Okay. Let's see how this goes. I got a feeling it's going to fail somewhere. Expected 300. Okay, so it didn't like this. Time. Where is the timeout? Timeout duration. Okay. I think it's going to be seconds. Okay, so you wanted it like that instead. Oh, okay, so I'll need to update that. So it didn't like me using the code resource, which was here in Lambda code asset. So we can have a look and see what that has been replaced by in a moment. So let's try deploying this, see if it will deploy. So now you can see that it's identified that I am basically deploying some application roles. So you've got this role that's been created that's getting all of these permissions. So it's getting access to logs, getting access to S3 buckets. So if you have a look here, it's saying that this specific Lambda execution role can be assumed by Lambda function. What's this? The service role. I don't actually know what that is, but you can see here the Lambda execution role is going to be able to perform these actions against these resources. Okay, so that's what I meant. So the Lambda service will be able to use the execution role, and also it'll be able to use the service role. I think that's like an internal account role. Then also the execution role that we're creating has access to get objects and put objects into different bucket locations. And then we should be able to also create and list the buckets themselves. Okay, so this is incorrect. I just noticed that bit now, so it should be not this, should be this one. So this is the bucket ARN, whereas this is the bucket ARN and any objects stored within that bucket. Okay, so slight change. Okay, so that's all there. And we, yes, then it should start deploying your changes. And we come over here. So it's making the changes now. That's 10:08, which is now. So was it identified? So it's creating the service role, it's creating the execution role, it's updated some metadata, it's so here it's completed the metadata update, it's completed the service role and execution role, started to create the Lambda function, and then here it's finished updating the CloudFormation stack. So we go back to our stack, we click at resources, we should have all of our new resources. So just sorting it, we've got metadata, we've got our two roles, we've got a service role and a Lambda function role. Let me just have a look what this is. I know, okay, I remember what's happened. So here is, it's created a Lambda function service role, and that one has Lambda basic execution role rights. So it pretty much has something, I think, really basic stuff. Okay, so it only has access to logs, so it really can't access anything else. So the reason why it created that service role is because I got my Lambda function up here, but I didn't actually link the execution role to it just yet. I think it's role. Okay, so now I think because it's procedure based, it's not going to like the fact that it happens after. So let's create the role first, and then I can link the Lambda function to the role. Let's just make sure it still works. So that service role was created simply because I didn't link a role, so it defaulted to creating one for me. Okay, so that one was fine, so I can deploy it. So what should happen is it should now clean up and delete that service role that got created for me. So after this gets done, we'll just have a look at the permissions, and then we'll have a look at the code, making sure that the code was pulled into the Lambda function. I won't actually test anything just yet. I actually don't know what any of the code does, and I think we'll just call it there in terms of this session. I think it's long enough. But hopefully this gives you a good idea on how to get started, how to initialize a Cdk solution. You create an empty directory, Cdk init, and then specify the language, so Python. Then you go into the virtual environment, you install all the packages, and you can just pretty much get started typing in Cdk ls, and you have a basic empty project or stack. Okay, so here, so it's sorting again, got my S3 bucket, my Lambda function. I've now only got one application role. The service role before has been deleted. That's because that was the default one, but now I've linked it correctly, so this role now exists. Now, as I said, I'll go have a look at the Lambda function, and let's just check out to see whether the code got imported correctly. Okay, so here is the code. So as I said, that resource, where is it? This Lambda code asset. So it's actually pulled in everything in this directory. All right, so in this directory, which is the Cdk DL demo 2 directory, this one, which includes these 3 files. And that's why when you go over to the Lambda function on the left, you can see those 3 files coming up, and you can see the Python code that was stored in this file. And if we continue, the handler is S3 custom resource and then goes to handler. So S3 custom resource points to this file. And then once it finds this file, then it points to this function. And then that's the entry point for any transactions that come through or trigger this Lambda function. Okay. Next, I was going to have a look at the role itself. Okay, let's have a look at the role. So this one, I'm expecting, again, access to CloudWatch logs, and then some access to S3 buckets, and hopefully it's completed the find and replace for me. Okay, so here it's got access to the CloudWatch logs. Then here it's got my get access from this bucket. So this is an external bucket as far as I know. Then this is the access to put objects into this location. So remember I had the account number and the region here. Those were like placeholders. So if we go back over to here, we can see they're placeholders. And now they've been completely replaced with the appropriate account number, which is corresponding to up here, ends in 310. And then this is the Sydney region. Okay, so these ones have been replaced by CloudFormation. So I'll show you that. So if I open up the template that was deployed, you can see here that in the template itself, it still has the AWS account placeholder and the AWS region placeholder. So this FN sub, which is a CloudFormation substitution function, will read in this whole string and then find and replace the parameters with the environment variables, which is the account number and the region. And then it gets deployed. It gets deployed as these values. Okay, so at the moment, looks good. All of it corresponds. The only thing that I noticed was it's got a 0 here. That's because I didn't actually name the policy as in the inline policy itself. So if I went back to here, inline policies is a policy document. I don't know if it has a name element. What was it? It was assign SIDs. Let's just try and copy what they've assigned. Oh, they've done another substitute. Okay. Okay. It's this. So that's what they've done. Don't know if this one will work or not. So again, I'm using CloudFormation to substitute. Yeah, I don't think that's the correct way to set the name. Not too sure on that one. Anyway, let's just call it there. So I've added a bucket, add a reference to code. It does say it's being deprecated, this specific feature. So you'll need to, where is it complaining about? Okay, so that's back to how it was before. Yeah, so it says use from asset. Okay, let's just have a look at what that is. Has this kicked me out yet? No. No. From asset. Okay, so it's part of. Okay. So it says to use this format instead. Okay, let's just try and fix this one up. And we'll call it there. So lambda code from assets. Okay, looks like it's pretty much the same thing. That's because this page is the TypeScript version. And to see the Python version, sometimes you can click on Python and it'll tell you. Okay, here. So it gives you the Python version of the document. Yep, looks like it's fine. And Cdk. Now this shouldn't actually deploy anything, as in shouldn't actually change anything because there's no changes. I just changed the way that it was referring to that file, but it's one and the same thing. Don't really know what it's updating. Okay, but yeah, instead of using any more time, we'll leave it there. Yes, it didn't make any changes. So we've got our S3 bucket. So going back to here, we've got the metadata, we've got the role that the Lambda function will use, and we've got an S3 bucket. We've set everything up in Cdk. We started with an empty directory. We then ran Cdk Initialize, I think it was language Python. And then that will populate your working area with different files. Then we looked at cdk.json. I explained that this is the entry point, so app.py. This now refers to any application stack. So if you think of a stack as a CloudFormation stack, so this is the corresponding CloudFormation stack that we want to deploy. And then the definition of this class is imported from this location. So this is the directory and this is the file. So we open that. So this was the directory and this was the file. Then that's where we've been editing. Then at the top, we have been importing any, I guess, libraries that we're going to need or any AWS resources that we want to use. So we're not using SQS, but that was part of the worked example. We're using S3, we're using Lambda, we're using IAM. This was the example at the very beginning. And then in our class, as this is the initializer function. So when you create this stack, all of these will be created inside. And then we've got a S3 bucket. I didn't set a name, set it to private, block all access or public access. Then I created a reference to this directory location, which is this specific directory location, Cdk DL demo 2. Then I've got this, I guess, code, which is pointing to this asset, which is pointing to this directory location. And then we've also defined the IAM role. So we've just got an ID. We have said which service can assume this role. So which service or AWS service can actually use this role. Path, which is set it to root. And then we've drafted some of these policy documents, which include multiple policy statements. We've got CloudWatch log access, and we've got S3 access for getting objects from an external bucket. And then we've also got our internal bucket locations. So we've got put access, so write access, and ability to create the bucket itself and also list objects within that bucket. And then lastly, we've got the Lambda function. So Lambda function, we've got a pointer to the handler. So this is the file up here. Handler is the function within this file, which is over here. And then we've got the code. So this is pointing to this resource up here. So if you can think of this one, so this is the directory. This is the code from assets. So from this directory, what happens is basically this whole directory gets zipped up. And then you can think of this object being simply a zip file of this directory. So then we're passing that zip file into this location and saying this is where you can find the code. And then the handler above points to where can I find reference to the function. Then we had timeout. We had a 300 there, and it didn't like it when we attempted to synthesize the code. And then we just looked up over here and saw that somewhere in here, here, timeout, it says duration. So we used the duration object, and it had seconds. So we set it to 300 seconds. Then for runtime, it's the same sort of thing. You needed the runtime object, so we used a static variable. We're using Python 3.8. And then lastly, we made reference to the role that we created above. Then we ran Cdk Deploy, which will simply deploy everything in our whole repository, or you can simply name the stack that you want to deploy. Now for cleanup, you can do Cdk Destroy, and that should go into your AWS account and start cleaning up all of your resources. Now, one thing to note is we did create a S3 bucket. So I think by default, the S3 buckets don't generally get deleted. And it's probably set to retain by default. So if we go back over here, let's just open up our S3 bucket. So if we refresh this, everything's been deleted. You can see it's deleted, skipped. So if we have a look at the template, I think it's got to retain. Yep. So this S3 bucket resource has a deletion policy and it's set to retain. So this is just to avoid any errors when it's cleaning up itself. Because what happens is if you try to delete the S3 bucket and it has some objects or files in there, it would cause an error. So for that reason, I think CDK have just set it to default to retain. Now you can change this. Here you can set auto delete objects, and then I think it's true. Let's see, what does it say? Auto delete objects boolean. So yes, you can set it to true, and that will auto delete the objects and clean up your bucket and then delete your bucket. So let's just check that. So Cdk synth. So what this is doing is synthesizing the stack and then just printing this stack out. Okay, so it doesn't like me setting that value alone. So what is it called? Removal policy. What does it want? Okay, wants a removal policy object, destroy. Okay. Okay, so by me setting the removal policy and setting to destroy, that now should have changed the default action from retain to destroy. So where are we? Here. We've got deletion policy, delete. Okay, so it's got AWS CDK auto deletion objects set to true. So I think this is something to do with internal CDK has built-in actions to execute this. It has built-in commands to automatically clear all the objects in your bucket when you're cleaning it up. So it's actually not a I guess, native feature of CloudFormation to automatically delete objects. So I think that's why it's implemented in this way. Okay. So let's just see that in action. Before we do that, as I said, if we go back to here, you see that it's still got my S3 bucket. So let's just delete this. See, so it's still there. Let's delete this thing. Doesn't have anything that we need. Okay, so that's gone. Let's see this in action. I want to see that it does clean itself up nicely. And I'm going to upload a file there and leave it just to make sure it can delete everything. All right, so we go back to CloudFormation. We've got our new stack that's creating. We've got our resources that are creating. Okay, so it's done a bit more this time. Interesting. So to handle that auto delete is actually, it generates a whole bunch more. Okay, where have we got? Okay, so we've now, to actually clean up the objects, it's actually generated a whole bunch of Lambda functions and custom resources to handle this. That's why I said, because it's not native CloudFormation, or it's not a native CloudFormation feature. So what the developers of Cdk have done is created extra functionality by building out a Lambda function that will handle the deletion of all the objects. So to go through it, you've got your bucket policy, which is not something that we had there previously. Let's just have a look at what it's added. That's over here. Let's just close some of these things. And then bucket policy, where are my permissions? Okay, so here it's provided access to this specific role. So this role is got access to get the buckets, list, and delete. Okay. And then we should have, we've got a custom bucket policy. We've got the same S3 bucket. We've got, I think this is our original Lambda function. And now we've got a new Lambda function that is handling the deletion of objects for us. Okay, so this is all application code that looks like generated from Cdk. So this is not actually part of our solution, but because we enabled auto delete, it went and created that Lambda function. Then it's got a corresponding role, and this should only have permissions to delete on that specific bucket, I think. Interesting. So it has even less permissions. So it only has access to not too sure how this is working. Interesting. So it only has access to CloudWatch logs. I'm not sure how it actually deletes stuff. This is the first time I'm seeing it. Okay, let's just test this out. Let's get the S3 bucket that it's created. And let's just upload a file in there. Can I upload by this? No. Oh, okay. That's because this is going through Citrix. It doesn't like it. Okay, let's just something small. Okay, so we've got a file in our S3 bucket now. So when I go to destroy, hopefully it's able to clean everything up for me. So let's have a look. What is it doing? Okay, so this time it's deleted everything. So it managed to empty out this bucket and then delete it also. If I refresh, it should be gone. All right, the bucket's been deleted. Cool. All right, so that's a new feature that I just found out about today too. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Simply CDK creation of the project, adding resources, deploying resources, and cleaning up. All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks.